Hello again. We're talking about Berlin Alexanderplatz episodes 13 and 14. And 13 is about an hour long, and it's about as linear as Berlin Alexanderplatz can be. And then episode 14 is kind of its own episode, and it lasts about 2 hours, and and it really has a kind of different style to it, and it kind of sews up and confirms a lot of things that we've been talking about in the previous episodes. But it also opens a bunch of other doors and has a bunch of other enigmas and puzzles to it that need discussing, and maybe we can tease out today. So I'm going to hand it over to Michael, and he's going to try and give a little summary or start to our discussion.
Well, the number 13, I think, is the end of the novel, and the epilogue, I think, is Fassbinder's. But the number 13 is called "The Outside and the Inside and the Secret of Fear of the Secret," and it begins with Franz drinking. He's in grief at the death of Mieze. He's wearing her hosiery. He has her lipstick smeared on his face. He speaks of her. He looks in the mirror. He seems disgusted at himself, puzzled. We see the canary in the cage, and the shots are so composed. The lights and darks of the close-ups, and the yellow of the canary. And Eva comes, and Franz does not know that Mieze is dead. Eva does not know that Mieze is dead. They think she's left. Eva tries to comfort him. He is just insane with grief that she has left him. And the voice, the narrator, who comes and goes in this mysteriously, he says, "The storm returns." And Eva says, "Feel my tummy. It's your baby. Herbert thinks it's his, but it's yours. This is what Mieze wanted." And then Eva's going, "I want to keep the baby. I don't want to give it to you." And things are fairly hysterical. There are places where the voice didn't make sense to me at all. Then Franz is in the forest where Eva was killed, looking for her, as though she's lost in the forest. He still doesn't know she's dead. And he calls out to her and he says, "I love you." And we're seeing the very place where Eva died. Mieze died, I'm sorry, where Mieze was killed and Mieze died. And then I forget if it's a narration or if it's in print, but there's the word, the breath is a weight. WEIGHT, not WAIT. And you feel that. You feel that in the photography. You feel it's difficult to breathe in this world Franz is in. And then, amazingly enough, we are at a gang meeting at Kulm's where Reinhold and who was murdered, Mieze, of course, nobody knows it. Reinhold and Merck and these people are telling Kulm's that they want to vote. They don't want to steal stuff. They want to steal money. And Kulm's is aware that he does very well. They steal stuff and he sells it on the black market. He takes a big share. He gives them paychecks. They're doing quite well given the times. But it's a capitalist operation. He's getting the big share. And they say things should be shared equally and they should take a vote. And they want to rob money. And it's a jolting segue. So the gang votes, and then they're trying to crack a safe, and Merrick is operating this blowtorch, but they don't really know how to operate the blowtorch. And the voice says, the narrator says, life is at stake. And the robbery goes wrong. They can't open the safe. Merrick makes a mistake with the blowtorch. He torches his own hand. Franz is in the unusual position in this story of helping somebody else get out of a bad situation. And he takes Merrick to his apartment, and he's bandaging the burn. What you're supposed to do with burns, by the way. Not supposed to put butter on them either. Best thing is to run them under cold water, very cold water. But anyway, and Merrick is thinking Reinhold is a swine, and we don't know. We're about to find out that Merrick was enlisted by Reinhold to help bury the body of Mitza. So Merck knows what's been going on, and he tries to tell Franz that Reinhold is a swine. But Franz says several things. He says, sometimes I notice when I'm speaking that what I'm saying is pure baloney. And that's when Merck tells Franz about Reinhold. But Franz insists Reinhold is good. And then in print, you see on the screen, in his inmost heart, there are two he loves, Nietzsche and Reinhold. And Merck leaves the apartment with his house bandaged and saying enigmatically, I haven't told you everything. Then Nietzsche's washing in the apartment through these whole scenes. Nietzsche's underwear and hosiery have been washed and are hanging from strings all over the apartment. And next we see Merck has obviously gone to the police, and he's showing. Oh, he has talked with the bartender and trying to figure. Did I commit an illegal act by doing? I may have committed an illegal act, and they go through that. And then Mertz is showing the police where her body is in the forest, where we've just seen Franz be, and there's a line, and I can't remember whether it's spoken by somebody, but I don't think it was. I think it's either written on the edge of the screen or the voice says it. She was destroyed because she happened to stand next to that man. And then there's a quote from Job. And then Eva visits Franz, and she looks terrible. And she refuses to enter his apartment. And he has to make her enter. And she has a newspaper in her hand, and she thrusts it at him, and he opens it, and he says, that's me and Reinhold. What's all this? There's his picture, there's Reinhold's picture, there's Mietz's picture, and he and Reinhold are accused of her murder. And what we're going to go back and forth with in this one and a little bit in the next one is Franz is going to be tried for the murder with Reinhold, but he is going to be acquitted as not having committed the murder, and Reinhold is going to be convicted. Apparently for murdering a prostitute in Germany at this time, you get 10 years.
No, it's there's a whole thing about the he gets manslaughter because because
because Franz has defended him, saying it was done in a rage,
right?
So it wasn't premeditated murder.
Yeah, and we also find out that Franz was convicted of battery, not murder. And that's why he got 4 years.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But Franz, now we're back in the apartment, and he is happy He's saying she's dead. She didn't leave me. Someone killed her. And right then, there's a beautiful shot of Ava watching him. I hope I'm not jumping around, but this thing jumps around. Then we see Ida murdered again. Then the narrator sort of recites more disasters. And then Franz is laughing hysterically. And Eva says, "What are you laughing at?" And Franz says what we've heard the narrator say and what we've seen in print over the course of the episodes. Franz says, "There is a reaper named Death, and he reigns over it all." And as he says that, he takes the canary in his hands and kills it. Eva is in tears, and his response to meet his death is to kill the yellow bird. And he actually looks at Eva and says, "Look at me, Eva. Is something wrong with me?" And I thought, finally, he's asking this question. And he repeats it and repeats it. And then he tells Eva that he knows Reinhold threw him out of the car. And he says, a guy he's talking about himself, has to learn things. I'm not mad at him. And he's saying it's not his fault. And Herbert is suddenly there. I don't know how he got there. And he's saying, "Why didn't you tell Mita? If you'd have said something, Mita would still be alive." And Franz is saying, "It's not my fault." And Herbert says something that indicates he's going to try to get Reinhold killed. And Franz says to him, "Hands off him. Hands off Reinhold, Herbert. He belongs to me." And then the screen is full of Franz's face. Laughing, he repeats, "He belongs to me," and he laughs hysterically. Yeah. End of 13.
Yeah, and he's kind of asking himself. He's like, "He belongs to me," and then he's like, "He belongs to me."
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, there was a couple of things in this episode that I found really compelling and poignant. I think the voiceover that you're talking about in that first scene in the apartment, where it keeps talking about the forest, and it's talking about trees on the periphery of the forest being blown around from side to side, but the trees in the middle of the forest are like secure, right? And this is kind of like a theme that comes and goes over the whole thing, where it talks about like this black pool in the middle of the forest that's untouched by all the storms and everything.
Yes.
And you know, I don't really know how to articulate like what's being said there, but I think that he's talking about the kind of like the immortal soul inside of this person that is kind of that keeps on going despite what's going on the periphery in the physical plane. There's a solid part of Franz that kind of sticks there. The meeting with Pooms I found really entertaining, because I think it's like an allegory for politics in a sense.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It was this is what's going on politically out there. It makes just as little sense as this.
Yeah. And it kind of goes into capitalism, and it goes into communism, and it goes into all these different forms just in this one little 10-minute interaction with these guys. And it's funny because Bieberkopf shows up at the meeting, and then they just totally ignore, like, he's not in that scene at all. It's all Pooms and these different guys going over this whole thing. I thought that was really interesting. But I think one of the most poignant scenes in it is when he's dressing Mech's arm, and he says something like what does he say? He says something like this should be done by somebody who is sensitive to the other person, or you know what I'm saying?
He says to care for somebody this way, what I'm doing here, you need to be care about the person. You need to be.
Yeah.
I'm not quoting directly, but you need to care about the person. You need to be sensitive to their feelings.
Yeah.
And more and more, the dialogue seems to be more and more divorced from reality, and at the same time obliquely commenting on the reality.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's more. I mean, it's a reality what he's talking about. You know, that's a real thing. I think that you know, somebody coldly, you know, dressing your wound is you know, like a stranger dressing your wound is quite different than somebody who's actually kind of on your level and connecting with you.
Right.
And I think that's what's being gotten at in the scene. You know, and there's these different levels of reality here, and it's poignant because Mech is really, I think he totally understands what Bieberkopf is saying, and it's more poignant because he has this whole secret that he's kind of kept from Bieberkopf about what occurred with Mitza, and there's so much conflicting things going on with Mech because in a sense he felt that him taking Mitza out to meet Reinhold would end the relationship with Bieberkopf that he knew was going to damage Bieberkopf in the end. Like he was kind of like doing France a favor by laying her off on Reinhold because he knew that like it was gonna end with Bieberkopf. Like he saw her beat her and he knew he beat her and he's like, oh shit, he's gonna like murder another woman and end up in prison again and so there's this real like moral conundrum going on with Mech, and he shows himself to be in this episode to like have a moral core, and he goes to the police and they kind of ask him, you know, why are you doing this, and like how are you going to make it sound, you know, how are you going to, the police ask him, how are you going to say that you weren't involved or that you didn't kill her, like when Reinhold says that you killed her, what are you going to say about it? And he's just kind of like throwing it all out there and laying it on the line and just saying, you know, let whatever come, you know, I'm just going to be honest about this no matter what comes of it, you know. And like he could lie and he could make up some bullshit about it, but he's just really kind of throwing himself on the mercy of God, you know. And yeah, the that last scene where Ava comes and gives him the paper, and he's sitting there and looking at the paper, and he keeps going, you know, Reinhold meets me. Reinhold meets me. And he's like trying, you know, it's like dawning on him, and he's trying to grasp it, and you can see the depth of the trauma that's occurring to him. And then it's like his personality steps in, and he says, you know, like the only way out of this like intense situation is for him to, it's like he's kind of grasping at the life preserver of, oh, she didn't leave me, you know, she was actually murdered. And then he kind of realizes how, you know, partly through Ava, you know, calling him on that and how grotesque that is, he kind of realizes how bizarre that is to feel that way. And then he just totally freaking loses it, and it's just too much, and he just becomes like a lunatic at that point. It's like all too much and all too conflicting, and I think that
he kills the bird.
Yeah, which is weird. I'm not really, I mean, you could say that the bird is kind of like Mitza, you know, and she's out of the cage now. You know, she's out of that.
It's her spirit.
Prison. What?
It's like it's her spirit. It's like the bird is her spirit.
Yeah.
She brought it in. It brought that color and birdsong into his life, into his apartment, and perhaps he can't bear to look at it, can't bear to hear it, and that's why he kills it. I was shocked by the violence, so I wasn't understanding it.
Yeah.
I don't know if they actually killed the bird, but at the end, there's a dead bird there.
Yeah.
So somebody killed the bird.
Yeah.
Whether you're watching it happen is vague, and I've gotten sensitive about that kind of stuff.
Well, the other thing that the voice says a few times in the in this episode is that the breath is a sphere, and
yes,
and it breathes in and out, and I think that theme is really it's biblical. It's I don't know how you'd call it, rabbinical or Kabbalic or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
There's this idea, but it's originally the idea of the breath of Brahma. In the Vedas,
Mm-hmm.
it's the great breath of Brahma that creates the entire physical cosmos and the universe. That there's a breathing in and a breathing out. There's a period called pralaya when there's no breathing out, and it's all latent, like the entire universe is in a latent state. But the great breath is called a manvantara, and it lasts for however many billions of years, and then it slowly like breathes back in and goes back inside. But that breath is, you can look at it as a sphere, as a physical sphere. That outside of that is the eternal, is the immortal singularity, I guess you could call it, or the absolute. But I think that what he's getting at is this kind of this prison of the physical plane that they're in, and how they're dealing with that, and all the snares in that physical plane that drag them down, all their sensualities and passions and anger and greed and lust and all these different things that they're dealing with. But and then it refers to Job again. It talks about Job sitting with his like pus-filled sores, and kind of Job at his lowest point in that narrative. When Job is just, he's lost everything, and he just keeps being punished by God, like over and over again.
Yeah.
And that whole story of Job is it's kind of taken from the Egyptian initiation stories, and Job is being initiated through this suffering. He's learning what is really lasting and what isn't temporal, and that he's learning to see this suffering, and as it kind of puts him in a different direction from his physical suffering, and also his attachments to his family, obviously with Job, and he's got to get past all that, and just kind of set his mind on the eternal, I guess. But that's kind of my take on the kind of esoteric part of what the voice is talking about. Yeah, but yeah.
Well, at the very end, after the credits, which is really unusual.
Yeah.
There is print on the screen. Franz Bieberkopf has reached the end of his mortal path.
Yep.
The time has come to break with him. The man is finished.
Yeah. Yeah, the man is finished.
And yes, the man is finished. And so you're making a distinction between the man and his soul.
Yeah. Well, it says his mortal life.
Okay.
It says his mortal life is
That's
finished.
Right. His mortal path.
Yeah.
He's reached the end of his mortal path.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah. So he's kind of been dealing with this like naked physicality. He hasn't really gotten into the deeper levels of his psyche yet, and which kind of comes along in the next 2 hours, that he's dealing with like his motivations and the causes of all these things that have been going on. But it's very interesting how the entire first 13 episodes can be looked at as just the external effects of what's going on inwardly, right? And then
Yes.
it's kind of the last 2 hours is really about what is the cause of all of that. It's like what is the film that is being projected on this screen of physicality, on the screen of matter, and he kind of just has to lose his mind and go into this state to get to that point.
Well, it has a very interesting title, those last 2 hours, number 14. My Dream of the Dream of Franz Bieberkopf by Alfred Doblin, an epilogue. And I take the mind to be Fassbinder. I don't know who else it could be.
I don't think...
Because he's saying, this is my dream of the dream of the story of Franz Bieberkopf by Alfred Doblin.
Yeah, I don't think that I think this was written in the Doblin book. There's this whole fourth wall thing that's going on there where and I think Doblin was breaking the fourth wall in a sense in the novel by kind of standing outside himself too. The author is standing outside his narration and who he is, and observing the entire first 13 chapters of the book from an even more divorced space, which is funny because in that...
Now you've done it for me. Now I've got to get the book.
Yeah, man. I mean, this guy is really... I've been looking into his other books, and they're also look really fascinating. But in the last 2 hours, there's scenes where there's the two kind of guardian angels, Terah and Sarug. Yeah. And Terah is Abraham's father, and Sarug is Abraham's grandfather. And I don't really understand like what's going on there, like why they're named after.
No, I don't either. And one is a man and one is a woman.
Yeah, one's a man and one is a woman.
And they're dressed the same way, and they both have long hair.
Yeah, which Kabbalistically, like when you look into the Old Testament esoterically, like a lot of the men are actually esoterically women. Like Cain and Abel is like Abel is actually a woman, and when Cain slays Abel, in a lot of the like esoteric Jewish story, to slay means to have sex with, and it's kind of a story of the evolution of man and the hermaphrodite splitting into two different sexes. Anyway, that's a whole other story. But anyway, I just thought I'd say that I'm not really sure what's going on there, but he's got these two guardian angels. But anyway, there's these scenes later on when Franz is really suffering, and they're observing him through kind of a portal or window. They're observing him being tortured and suffering, and there's a guy standing in front of them that has a beard and sunglasses.
Yes.
That's Fassbinder. So
yes.
Yeah, Fassbinder is like watching, he's kind of like breaking that fourth wall and being an observer of what's going on in it. So yeah, that's an interesting part of it. But why don't you give me your first impressions of those first couple of scenes in the last episode?
the film asks, why are two people walking beside this man? Two angels on Alexanderplatz, Berlin, 1928. And Ida is there, and she's walking with this strange limp, and she's mocking him, and Franz is saying, "My life is over. I'm finished. I don't know how it all came about." Then there's a rabbi who's on morphine who speaks of Plato, and there are small fires everywhere on the street. This is an exterior, and there are small fires everywhere on the street. So you're led to believe, okay, this is some amalgam, I think, of paradise and hell. And as soon as you get that impression, Franz finds Mitz's body. And the angel says to Franz, the man, the female angel, the man has unwittingly failed to grow up.
Yeah.
And so you see Franz as suddenly framed by this as an eternal child whose impressions stayed what the child's impressions were. He wants to think highly of Reinhold. He doesn't want to believe Mietze left him. He clings to a perception like a lifeline because he's so lost. And anything that makes sense quite at the moment can lead him this way and that, as we've seen happen over and over through 13 episodes. And
I think the key word is unwittingly.
Yes.
He's trying to grow up, and he's trying to, he's always trying, he's always aspiring, but he just can't. He just can't get there. He can't. Whatever grow up means. It's kind of a funny thing for an angel to say.
And the older I get, the more I don't know what grow up. But no, seriously, you get to be 78 and you go, I don't know what this word means. I don't know what I'm supposed to be here. But we see Reinhold in a prison cell, and his cellmate, a man, is his lover. And he really seems like he's in love with this guy. He talks to the guy about the women, and then he says something I find completely unforgivable. I killed a girl. I didn't want to. It just happened. When he lured the girl out there, he set the entire thing up. He had ambushed her in that conversation in episode 12. He set her up to be out there. He manipulates Merck, blackmails Merck into helping him get her out there. She's completely surprised, and she thinks she's going to protect Franz. And then we see Franz, after that scene, we see Franz in a straitjacket, and he passes Reinhold in jail, in a courtroom kind of setting. And then you cut, and you see the print, I think it's the print, the death of a child and the birth of a worthwhile human being. And then you see Franz in a Reinhold again, but Reinhold has an axe. There are all these naked and half-naked people, and you don't actually see Reinhold cut off Franz's arm with the axe, but that's the implication. And then, as you can hear, I took notes furiously. I've got more than 70 pages of notes here.
Yeah, why don't we slow down? And there's some stuff I wanted to address on the.
Okay, good.
There's a conversation between Tara and Sarug where they're talking about strength, and they're talking about how Sarug became Sarug, and he doesn't quite know. She says that you must have, through lifetimes, you must have built up who you are now.
Oh, yes.
But
yes.
he can't remember who he who he was, or how he came to be this angel, right? Like
Hmm.
and I mean, what she's getting at is that he's gone through all this suffering and this experience before, but now he has become this deity in a sense, or like an angel, and he just is who he is now without remembering how he attained that, you know. And I thought that was really interesting.
Yes, that is interesting.
And it
I
really,
overlooked that.
I think that
Thank you. That is interesting.
there is a theme throughout this, that there's the the actual characters are kind of being dictated by forces that are above them, that are more obtuse, and more
Hmm.
uh, more
How do you
archetypal,
mean obtuse?
like more archetypal,
Hmm.
uh, you know, like uh, they're like principles or functions of the universe that are being
Hmm.
played out in these people. Um,
Hmm.
so you know, the principle of limit, or the principle of unity, or the
Hmm.
principle of femininity, or protection, or things like that, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And and uh, and I think that but it's all kind of working around France to bring him to this place of initiation. Um, all these elements are kind of like a recipe that are creating um, the the refinement of France's soul, in a sense.
Hmm.
Um, and
Yes.
and and I think that you know, like you're talking about Reinhold saying that, like, I didn't want to, and you know, I didn't, you know, it just happened, you know. Well, in a sense, it kind of, it was kind of inevitable, you know, like he's just kind of being, it is him that's doing it, but the forces behind him are kind of dictating that this event happen, and he's being used as a tool for this event to happen, um, so that this recipe can be completed for the refinement of France's soul. You understand what I'm saying?
I do understand what you're saying. I've got to think about that more, because I am.
I mean, Mitza's not blameless either. You know, she's not like some like innocent. Uh, you know, she has her own.
No, she's a prostitute, and even the testimony in court, or something somebody says, or the voice uh, mentions that. You know, she's uh, uh, not a stainless person, but she is the least conflicted of the people there. She is the people the one person who truly means no harm.
I don't know. I don't believe. No, 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 no. I don't think that at all, man. I think she's probably one of the most like deeply conflicted of all the people, because
How interesting.
she's you know, she's got this whole thing where she doesn't want Franz to be independent. She doesn't want him to not have to lean on her. She's holding him back. She's eventually going. You know, she does break his heart. Um, she's totally conflicted about that. How she, you know, actually, you know, she's just don't letting her emotions overtake her with, you know, any, you know, these different guys that come along. um I mean,
She's very consistent in wanting Franz to love her, and in trying to prove her love.
Yeah, but how much of that is just being possessive?
That's a good question. Uh, uh, I'm going to give her a lot more of a break than you are, but
Well, we're conditioned to look at to look at women as like these innocent, you know, blameless people, you know, and
Well,
that's not.
I don't do that, but she has come to Berlin. She has fallen in with her.
Sure.
She becomes a prostitute, which means lying and manipulation and all that goes with it. She is. She finds what Franz calls a benefactor. She sleeps with the benefactor's nephew, and so in that sense, you're absolutely right. And yet something shines in her that I do take seriously.
Sure, yeah.
Something shines in her that's not shining in anybody else.
Right. I think that the paradox is that she's both a detriment and an assistance to Franz's evolution, right? Which is the paradox of like every character in this thing, like everybody's like that. Mech is like that too, right?
Yes. And the one person who has self-awareness is Eva, which mythologically is interesting. The one person who has self-awareness is Eva. And Eva loses the baby. She's not going to have Franz's baby. But there are continual shots of her that emphasize a beauty that we do not see at first in her. She gets more and more beautiful in these close-ups as the film goes on, which I find very interesting and don't pretend to understand. But as he is developing, she is watching at the edge of his experience, and they sleep together occasionally. She gets pregnant by him because she wants to, and then loses the baby. And it's as though this whole series of events has broken her heart. But she, too, at the edge of the journey, where he's in the middle of the journey, she has grown through all this as well. And it's done silently. It's done with the close-ups. You see her continually, in this last episode especially, in different kinds of close-ups. Some she's intensely suffering, and then as it goes on, you see her close-up just showing up silently with a presence of consciousness and wisdom. Wisdom, Sophia, and Eva. And it's interesting because it's not the voice does not comment about her. The camera comments about her.
Yeah, that's true.
So I do not know how much this is Fassbinder and how much this is Dover. But it's as though if you're going to concretize this as film, because the novel we read and it happens in our minds. We see all these people, and each person who reads is seeing different faces. A film, we're all seeing the same faces. And it seems that Fassbinder thought, if I'm going to concretize this story in film, make it visual, I need this face to show up. Because it doesn't make any sense where she shows up, especially in the final one. And I observe it. I don't know where it fits in all this. I really admire your grasp of the mythology and the various traditions that you're drawing upon. I know a little about them. I know enough to know what you're talking about, but I don't know the sources. And I don't mean I understand what you're talking about. I mean, I know what you're talking about. That's the difference. I have to think about understanding. But Eva is truly a mystery in this, and the image does grow and grow throughout the film. And it is she who brings, this is what I'm trying to get at. It is she who brings the newspaper to Franz. It is she who tells him an unavoidable truth. in the concrete here and now of you and Reinhold are being accused of murder. You murdered Eva, murdered Mita. There's got to be a psychological thing about you mixing these women up. But that she brings him that truth, and she witnesses his reaction. And she witnesses it with the witness of witnesses, Mrs. Bast, and they're clinging to each other this whole time, and for a good part of the time, while Franz is going through his reactions and killing the bird.
Yeah, you can look at it like if you look at the Garden of Eden as a womb, right? And
yes,
and Adam and Eve have to leave that womb. They grow up, right? Like they're kind of they leave the womb. And there's this scene. I think she represents that womb. You know, this kind of protective womb that Franz is gestating in, and there's a scene. They keep showing him like they show Herbert and Ava running over
yes,
Franz.
Yes.
That they're actually the couple that's in that car. And there's this whole, they keep coming back to that stage of the car and him losing his arm and everything. But there's a scene where she draws him to her breast and he starts to suckle her breast. And then he runs over to the car and starts throwing up, you know? And it's like, he can't go back to that womb anymore. He can't, it's all about Franz standing on his own 2 feet and being self-reliant, right, and growing up, I guess is the point.
Also, at the very end of the dream sequence, the last thing we see in the entire film, the last images, are Reinhold murdering Mita. But also, what happens is that Mita knifes her own womb. I did see that, didn't I? That's not coming out of my
No, that was that redhead.
Okay, the redhead. Okay,
yeah.
Thank you.
I'm not sure what's going on there with the redhead. She's kind of that's like the last scene. I had to ask myself, why did he end it like that? And I think that the voice says we can't forget the sacrifices that brought us to this point. And I think that it's kind of like reiterating, like, because Franz backslides so much, like the whole story is about Franz backsliding, right? Like that's pretty much the whole deal, you know. And there's always this danger while he's on this physical plane of him backsliding into what he was doing before, so that memory has to kind of stay fresh all the time, and all that conflict has to stay fresh in his mind, or he's going to backslide again, and he's going to go back to his old ways. I think that's kind of why that scene happened. But we're getting ahead of ourselves here. One of the things about the whole last 2 hours that was compelling to me was the guy with the Lincoln beard and what he represents, you know, and like he's kind of guiding Franz through this whole experience, right? And he's kind of it's kind of like a mentor to him, but I think that the point is that Franz is almost like a protege to him. He's kind of like training Franz for something, and he says to him, there's a scene where they walk up to these steps. They're like walking together through Berlin Alexanderplatz, and it's very dark and dreamy and everything. And then he walks up these steps, the Lincoln beard guy, and he says, like, he goes into this thing about you come near me, and then you become afraid, and and you get lost in the darkness when you come near me, but like you should come near me. Um, and he said, like if you need a light, I'll shine a light for you. And he lights the and this song by Donovan starts playing, the Atlantis, and starts talking about Atlantis, and Franz comes up. He starts coming near to him and near to him, and but then he's like shoved back into this scene where the bartender is leading him into this tiled room, and he comes upon this whole pile of people laying there, and I think that it's Franz wants to come near to this mentor of his that's like bringing him towards kind of enlightenment and growth and self-reliance, and who he really is and who his kind of archetype is, but some part of him keeps sliding back and has more suffering to do, so that the guy just like sends him into this like dream realm where he's suffering again. And Franz sees this pile of bodies that are almost kind of, I think it's supposed to be like an orgy, but they couldn't really show that in a TV show. So it's him giving into his sensuality again. He walks into this room and he looks over and he's kind of hesitant, but then he just automatically starts taking his clothes off and gets into this like orgy state with these people. And it's I think it's supposed to represent him giving into his temptations again, giving him to sensuality and sin again. And then this Reinhold shows up. They lay him on this like tiled chute, and he gets dragged through this thing, and he's slaughtered, and it really is kind of reminiscent of initiatory practices of the Egyptians. Yeah, that was kind of my whole take on that. And there's another really cool scene where he's in a room with Reinhold, and he's saying to him, why do you keep making me suffer, and like why do I suffer so much? And Reinhold's like, but it's good for you to suffer. This is good, And he's like, like I keep saying, like Reinhold is like the tool of this suffering, that this growth requires suffering, and obviously Reinhold over this whole 2 hours is kind of being used as the tool of that.
Well, he's kind of the master of ceremonies in a painting by Bosch. There's a lot of Boschian stuff going on in the mise en scene, especially in the second hour of it. So it's this whole river of images, all of them portentous. It's not pretentious; it's portentous, and kind of swollen with possible meanings. So that again, watching it gets hypnotic. I don't think we're going to finish this off in this session.
I don't think so either. Yeah, I was just going to get into Luders and the large role that he plays in this too. The character I'm talking about, the guy Loiters or Luders,
Yes.
Like he's one of the first people that he sees as I think it's kind of supposed to be like purgatory, the place that he's walking around with the angels, right? In the first part of it. And but one of the first persons he sees is Luders. And he's like, "You're the one that started all this. It's all because of you.
Yes.
You started this whole thing." And it's funny because that was like, to us, that was so long ago, and you're like, you kind of just think of this guy as like a bit player, in the whole thing. But he actually has this real importance. But why don't we stop for the day there? There's a lot more to talk about, obviously. And
yes.
Yeah, we can talk about it next week.
Yeah, I'm gonna.